So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kira Duke, and I will be your host for today. I am with the Teaching with Primary Sources at MTSU program, and of course, this is part of our Discover Tennessee History webinar series today. We are doing this in partnership with a number of different organizations across the state. And of course, our feature presenter for today is the Tennessee State Library and Archives, which we're really excited to have with us. Before we get started, a couple things to keep in mind. If you would, please keep your mics muted. We are recording this for people to be able to view later on, and that will just help us have a cleaner audio. Also, if you would, please rename yourself, and you can do that by opening up the participant list, finding your name, hovering over it, and you'll have the option to rename there. And just put your first and last name, and that just helps us to know who is participating in today's webinar, and then, of course, to be able to respond to folks in the chat. We do want these sessions to be interactive, so you can do that in a couple of different ways. Of course, you have the option to use the chat function, and we hope that you will use that. We will be responding to comments and questions throughout the session. So go ahead and open that up if you would. You also have the option to use the reaction buttons, and you can find those. There's a hands clapping or a thumbs up that you can use. And then for some of ours, we'll be using polling, but I don't think that's something we're going to be utilizing for today's session. But again, please make use of those reactions and the chat function for today's session. And for all of these sessions in the webinar series, you can find the resources on a single Padlet. And the Padlet is linked here. You also can use that QR code there to be able to access that. So again, that's a great way to find all the resources referenced both in today's session and in our past sessions. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kelly Wilkerson with Tennessee State Library and Archives to get us started for today.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Kira. I'm going to share screen real quick. Well, give me a second, folks. All right, there we go. Yes, so thank you guys to everybody so much for coming out. Good afternoon. We are really excited to have you all here with us today for this 1-hour webinar. As Kira said, my name is Kelly Wilkerson, and I manage the education program at the Tennessee State Library and Archives. For those of you who are not familiar with the Library and Archives, we are a state agency located in downtown Nashville, dedicated to collecting and providing access to historic documents and photographs. We like to say we are one of the agencies doing the collecting for the primary sources of Tennessee history. And some of those resources, primary sources documenting Tennessee history, are what we will explore in our presentation today. Before we get started on our presentation, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on the construction of our new building, which began all the way back in December of 2017. So a couple of years ago at this point. You can see a couple of photos there on the screen. The photo at the top is the architect's rendering of the brand new building, and then the photo that is there at the bottom is the building as it is currently being constructed. That photograph, I think, was taken a couple of weeks ago. Our new building is located in downtown Nashville at the corner of 5th and Jefferson. It will be on Bicentennial Mall State Park. I don't know if hopefully many of the educators who are joining us on this webinar today have been able to visit that state park in downtown Nashville. So we are going to be in one corner. You guys may know where the Tennessee State Museum is, the brand new Tennessee State Museum. They are in one corner of the building on the side that the farmers market is on. We are going to be on the other corner of the park, at the same side that Greer Stadium, the baseball stadium that the Nashville Sounds are playing at. So we're going to be located there. That link that's there on the screen will actually give you a video feed of the building as it's currently under construction. We're really excited that this building will open to the public in the spring of 2021. So here just a few months, we're hoping that we can depending on what happens with the pandemic, we're hopeful that we will be able to welcome many of you to the new Tennessee State Library and Archives in the very near future. Some of you are probably interested in professional development credit for this 1-hour webinar. So at the end of the webinar, if you guys want to just respond to all those reminder emails that I've been sending you, and let me know that you need a professional development credit certificate, I will be happy to get those out to you a little bit later this week. My email is there on the screen, or like I said, you can just respond to all those reminder emails that I've sent you guys over the last couple of days. All right, so moving into our presentation just a little bit, we've kind of worked through introductions. We are going to get started here in just a second with our presentation for a document a day that we've been advertising the last several weeks and months. So we're excited that you all are here for that. Following that presentation, we will also spend some time showing you our website at the Tennessee State Library and Archives and all the great educational resources that are available for you there. I'll walk you through some of the new resources that we've been working on over the last several months and share with you ideas for utilizing some of the primary sources that we have in our collection in your classroom. So at this time, I think I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat. My colleague, Casey Jimerick, who's our Education Outreach Archivist at the Tennessee State Library and Archives, she is going to walk us through our presentation on a document a day, resources to keep your students engaged. So with that, Casey, I'll just turn things over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Like Kelly said, I'm Casey Jimerick. I'm the Education Outreach Archivist at the Tennessee State Library and Archives. So if you've ever taken a workshop with us in person, which feels so long ago now, I probably visited you in your county for one of those workshops. And so we were thinking of what to do for our Discover Tennessee History webinar that we are doing today, which I'm so glad that all of y'all could make it today and be here with us, because trust me, we definitely miss you guys and we definitely know what you're going through out there in the classroom. So thank you for taking your time today to kind of hang out with us and go through that. With that said, we kind of wanted to do something that we hope will benefit you. Even on a regular year, we always get the question from teachers, I'm so busy, I'm slammed, you guys have great resources, but it's so much. So they always ask us, what is the best source that we can use to teach one particular topic? And that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with y'all. And what we're going to do is a little activity called a document a day. And our hope with this is we're going to look at 10 different documents from 10 different eras that are going to hit 30 standards. And that's standards that hit American history. So that's 4th, 5th, 8th, and high school. I wish we could do 30 standards from each grade level, and maybe one day we will. But for right now, we're going to focus on these. And our goal here is to kind of be short, sweet, and to the point. We're wanting to make this as easy as possible. We're hoping that these documents will kind of serve as bell ringers for you. It might be to introduce a topic to students. It might be to do a quick review. Our hope is that, with these documents, it'll hit everything that you're supposed to get in the standards in a really easy, accessible way. I'll also mention that all the PowerPoints, so everything you're seeing from both me and Kelly, the discussion questions, anything we talk about today, any primary sources, those are going to be linked to you after the webinar. So you will definitely get everything that you're going to see today. Each slide for each document is going to have a series of discussion points. The hope here is that you can come back to this, when you're ready to teach this topic, and it's a super short, quick way to be like, oh, what was this document about? What's it going to hit? How is this going to help me in the classroom? That's kind of the point there. And also you'll know here down on the bottom what standards it's actually going to hit. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started and look at our very first document. Our first document here is the Battle of Saratoga Map. So you'll notice here, if you're into early American history, that this is a American Revolutionary War document. So we're starting at the beginning and going to kind of work our way up to modern history. And we're going to look at it a little closer, because if you do teach American Revolution, you might question, Battle of Saratoga. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen on October 10th. So this one is kind of fun to see how people who are even creating history, when this document was created, even then the memory was kind of flawed. But what I really love about this document is that it's really showing the battle in particular, because when we think of major battles and primary sources that are related to those battles, things that come up for me are, soldiers' letters, diary letters, things that really describe the gory aspect of war. And while that really hits at a personal and emotional level for us, sometimes, especially in 2020, that might be too much. And so, taking it from a different perspective while hitting those standards, right? The standards, we've all read them. We know that they want the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. They want the story. They want, we want to get as many facts as possible in a short amount of time. And that's why I really love this map. Does anyone know where Saratoga is? If you do, go ahead and write it in the chat. I'm curious to see if anyone might remember their American Revolutionary War knowledge. Yeah, awesome. Good job, guys. Yeah, it is in New York, and it's very strategic. So this battle, the Battle of Saratoga, while it was early in the Revolutionary War, it was extremely important. So we had British troops coming down from Canada, and they were meeting up with troops coming up from the south. And the plan was to attack Saratoga and essentially, squash any type of patriotic rebellion that are coming from the Americans. And in doing so, essentially, that's going to cut off the New England territories from everything else in the South. So that's going to be strategically really hard to come back from. And it's also going to show the rest of the world, specifically France, that the American rebels really aren't all that impressive, and that this shouldn't be an endeavor that the French take on. However, with the Battle of Saratoga, which you can see here on the map, reinforcements from the American side actually do arrive. And so it is an American victory, and it kind of changes the whole trajectory of the war, because after this, France is extremely supportive. And so that is when they joined the war. What is also really cool about this map, I always love to use map with students, because you can see, they can pick out anything. They know that this is the Hudson River. And you can talk about why would the battle occur along a major river? What would that have meant if the Americans had lost? Again, this map is also really great because it gives you a bunch of the general names. It gives you dates. It gives you within each one of these, it also talks about the events that happen. So you can get all the information you need for the Battle of Saratoga from this one map, which I really, really love, because like I said, our goal is to be short, sweet, and to the point as fast as we can for y'all. All right, so our next document here, we're gonna jump a little bit forward in time. And this document is actually a government document, because at the Tennessee State Library and Archives, we are one of the few state archives that actually collects both state records and personal records from Tennesseans. So this is one of those state documents. And it shows the population of Tennessee in 1842, which of course is really important. If you guys know your history, you know that Tennessee was already a state by 1796. So you might wonder, why do we really care about population in 1842? Well, it's getting closer and closer to other states having their statehood. And not only that, we're starting to really get into the deep dive of what will become the 3/5 Compromise. And so the 3/5 Compromise, as many of you know, was used to determine a population of a territory, and 3/5 referred to what an enslaved individual could count as. So they weren't counted as a full person, they were counted as 3/5. And what this document does is it keeps track of both the free population and the enslaved population and the total number entitled to representation for all three grand divisions of Tennessee, as well as the counties that we have at that time. So immediately when I see this document, I always think it's a great idea that we can pull in some of those really basic math skills and do a percentage comparison between East, Middle, and West Tennessee. Not only that, I really love this document for determining, context clues and trying to infer or get our students to think about what this might mean in the future. To think about, why does East Tennessee have a higher free population than West Tennessee? And how does Middle Tennessee compare to the two of them? And what is this going to mean as we get closer and closer to the American Civil War? How is this? We can ask our students, what do we think people in East Tennessee are going to feel versus people in West Tennessee? And this is, 19 years before the American Civil War. So we can start to see how these things are building, that it's not just an immediate set of circumstances that cause us to go to war. All right, and I always love that document too, because if your county does show up on it, I always like to know exactly, what's happening in my hometown. How does that compare to others around me? So this is a really great way to do that as well. All right, our next document, like I've mentioned, we're jumping around in time, but we're jumping forward in the standards. So this document right here that we're looking at, it is in regards to Indian removal. So like many of us know, there used to be several tribes in the South. Here in Tennessee, we had the Cherokee Native Americans through a series of multiple years and multiple treaties, which essentially end in 1830 with the American Indian Removal Act. Native Americans are essentially pushed from their homes, their ancestral homes here in the South and west of the Mississippi, or east of the Mississippi, to pushed out to lands out west, particularly Oklahoma. And what this document does, I'm going to ask you guys a quick question on this. When you think of Indian removal, who is the number one person that comes to mind? Go ahead and write it in the chat and see. Let's see what we come up with. Andrew Jackson, Andrew Jackson, Andrew Jackson. Yeah, it is overwhelmingly Andrew Jackson. He is definitely the first one that comes to mind for very good reasons, right? He is the president in 1830 when the Indian Removal Act is signed. He's a big part of this push. However, what I do love about this source, which really connects to those social studies practices that we're trying to teach our students about, is that this is going to create historical awareness, right? Because when they think about it, it's really easy to dive deep and just blame all of this on Andrew Jackson. But what this document does is kind of broaden that and shows that it is really a systemic event. It's a systemic goal, and it's definitely bigger than one person. This document right here is from the United States War Department. And what it does essentially is lay out the groundwork for federal troops who are going to be responsible for forcibly moving these people, from moving the Cherokee from the South out west. And so when you think about it in those terms, this isn't an easy, oh, I want this land, I hate this group of people. It is a very strategic way to move. And not only that, so we're creating more of a historical awareness and providing a better historical background, right? We're showing our students it's a full picture. Not only that, I really love this document because while it is early, sometimes when we're working with primary sources from the early 1800s, we get a lot of really difficult to read handwriting. We might get words that aren't used anymore or language that's not used in 2020. But this document, because it was so widely distributed, is very different. For one, it's typewritten, which is fantastic. And in the section that I've pulled up here, it talks about transporting, right? Thinking about that we actually have to transport 5,000 people, nearly 5,000 miles. And in here, even if you gave this to students with no context whatsoever, there's a lot of great things that they could pick out that would really tap into their historical empathy. Things like no person except those who are too young or too infirm to travel on foot will be transported in wagons or upon horses. So then you could ask your fourth grader, for instance, are you too young? Do you think you would get to be in the wagon? Probably not, which would mean, you're traveling those 5,000 miles on foot. How tired do you think you will be? How many people might get sick? How many people might die on this really hard journey? Not only that, think about all the things that you have in your home, all the things that are really, really precious to you and your family. You can't take it, right? All down here on number 5, it tells you specifically the amount, the weight of how much baggage you can bring. And you can bet that it's not going to be very heavy, so you're not going to be allowed to bring very much. So, you're giving up your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, but then you're also giving up your past, right? You're giving up not only your connection to your physical land and home, but also any kind of memories or toys or anything else that you might have had is now also not being transported with you. And how is that really going to impact you? How are you going to tell your story now that that's taken? And that's what I really love about this document. There's so many other good things in it. Good as in really great to dig through and understand this forced removal. And it's challenging when we talk about Native American primary sources, especially from this particular time period. And so this is a great way to really connect students with that historical empathy, also to show them civics and to know that this was a government event. And the document also discusses the specific land that they're going to cross, the rivers that they're going to cross, and how they're going to cross during that time. So there's a lot of really great things that you can pull out from this one document. The next document here is an advertisement. So we're switching it up. We've seen all sorts of different ones so far, right? We've seen a map, we've seen a couple government documents, and now we're gonna actually see one of the more social ones. This is the cotton gin. So it's an advertisement for cotton gin. Just to remind anyone, in case we need it, prior to the cotton gin, it was extremely difficult and physically hard to clean cotton. For instance, one person would usually take about 10 to 12 hours to clean 1 pound of cotton. And so what that meant, cotton wasn't really a profitable industry because it was so labor intensive. And with that, with seeing the downfall of cotton, there wasn't as much of a need for enslaved labor coming from Africa. So it was really a different type of slavery. However, as we all know, a northerner by the name of Eli Whitney creates the cotton gin in the late 1700s. And with that, people are actually able to clean cotton 50 times faster. So they're able to do 50 times more work than they had before. And so what that means is that's going to impact, of course, cotton plantations here in the South, but it's also going to impact the Industrial Revolution happening in both Britain and the Northern United States. And so it's all connected. What I really love about this particular document, right, it says things like the best is always the cheapest. So you can take that either way that you want. What I also really like about it, for me, when I learned about Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, right? Those are two things that always seem to come up in elementary school. It's one thing that you leave with. For me, I didn't really understand what a cotton gin was. I was coming from a state that wasn't in the South, and so I didn't really understand the concept of a plantation. There wasn't any farms nearby. So this image is a really great image that shows how the cotton goes through and the different cranks and wheels that turn it out into clean cotton. But what I like seeing about this is that it is an advertisement. So again, it connects back to economics. And that's a great little segue that you can have with students that, again, we're tapping into that historical empathy and historical awareness. We're broadening their ideas of that time period, and we're making it bigger. We're giving them the full picture by showing that slavery isn't just a few people in the South. It's not all one region that is participating in this practice. It's much larger, and it is very much an economic practice. It's steeped in economics. And this is a great way, just a quick little segue into that conversation. All right, following on that train, the next source here is a depiction of life for an enslaved individual. So this is coming from a piece of anti-slavery literature, and this is much more in regards to abolition. So let me ask you this. When you think of abolition, who is the #1 person that comes to mind? Who's the first one that popped into your mind when I'm like, who's an abolitionist? Who would be an example? Go ahead and write those in the chat. Douglas, A.L. think Stacy's probably saying Abraham Lincoln, maybe. There we go. Douglas, Frederick Douglass. I'm so glad that y'all said this. For me, what comes to mind is probably, yeah, Layla, same thing. William Lloyd Garrison is probably the first one that comes to mind for me, because he did a lot of anti-slavery literature. His newspaper, The Liberator, went all across the Northeast. And so he's the first one that comes to mind, but I'm so glad that you guys brought up Frederick Douglass, because this is actually his depiction of a life of an enslaved person. And it's coming from the second of his 2 narratives. And this is extremely important because during the 1850s, when this is created, I think it's created in 1855, there is just this rise in personal stories and literature. So this is an awesome way to tie history back to language arts, right? We're always trying to pair the two. This is a great way to do that, as well as art. Art is definitely coming in here. And so this novel, this narrative that Frederick Douglass provided, it really changes perspective on, people who had never seen an enslaved person or a plantation in their life. And so this really taps into their empathy. And it doesn't matter if the year is 1855, 1955, or 2005. This is really going to hit you no matter what year it is. And we'll take a look at why that is. So we'll see here. Right here is the very first image. So like I said, this shows the life of an enslaved person. And this image right here, if you guys can see, I really like it because it really taps into the feels, right? So this, oftentimes when we're talking about slavery and enslaved individuals, kids always ask me, there was more slaves than there were plantation owners. Why didn't they just run away? Why didn't they fight back? And we've been pushing a narrative that they haven't, which is obviously very much not true. And Frederick Douglass does a great job of showing us why that's not true. You can see here in this image, we've got an enslaved male. He's trying to run away, and he's being chased not only by armed men on horseback, but we've got dogs down here too. And they don't look like the kind of puppies that you would want to pet. So this is a great example of how even in the 1850s, we have evidence of, acts of rebellion, of enslaved individuals trying to break free and to liberate themselves. And so this is a great example of that. Another example down here that Frederick shows us is a slave auction. We've got an enslaved woman here. You can see her head is face down. She is surrounded by, from what I can tell, mostly men. And she, down here and behind the auction, we've got the symbol of freedom, right? The American flag at the courthouse. So this also taps into the feeling of, no one is standing up for this woman. We don't know anything about her. She could have been pulled away from her family, her children, her only home. We don't know. But again, it's tapping into your emotions to try to get you to feel a certain way and to help fight for abolition. On the other side here, we've got an image of enslaved individuals picking cotton. So you can see that they're kind of bent over. It looks labor intensive. And on the flip side, we have the overseer over here. He kind of looks like he's kicking back, maybe taking a nap. but they're not, this isn't like a happy-go-lucky day in the sun, right? He's got this whip, and there's another image of a dog. So, there's always this sense of danger looming over them. However, the other thing I really love about this, and that Frederick Douglass is showing us in 1850, so it's not a new concept. It's not something we've discovered in the 21st century. This is something that's always been part of the abolitionist story. Is that keeping the traditions that came from Africa, the dancing, the singing, the celebrating, any type of religious practices that individuals might have had when they were taken from Africa, is still being present in their lives. Of course, this does change, and this probably is why Frederick Douglass decided to show us this image. It does change after Nat Turner's rebellion. After Nat Turner's rebellion, slaves are no longer allowed to congregate in groups. Many of them cut down, their enslavers cut down on any type of celebrating music, that type of thing. So we don't know if this is done in secret, but you can see that they're smiling, they're dancing. It's a happy, joyous situation in there. There's a comfort in that community, and Frederick Douglass is doing a great job of showing that that sense of resiliency and survival. And the same down here, this is just showing the juxtaposition of the two different types of dwellings that enslaved individuals and the enslavers are living in. So I really love that document. Again, it's one of those things where an image is worth 1,000 words, and Frederick does a great job of showing that to us. And really giving us a picture of it, of what it would have been like for an enslaved person. And we didn't even have to say anything, right? You could give this to your kids and they could probably tell you the whole story of it. So I really, really like that document for that reason. Okay, our next document here, we're moving forward in time from abolition. We are going to, of course, the American Civil War, which hits a bunch of standards. This particular standard is in regards to the Battle of Shiloh. I know a lot of the standards say about 6 or 7 different battles. So even for me as a historian, it's hard to keep track of what battle was what and who did what and where, why, all that stuff. So the great way to do that is through this diary entry from Rachel Carter Craighead. So she was a Nashville socialite during the time of the Civil War, and she kept meticulous diaries, which is fantastic because, like I mentioned, with the Battle of Saratoga, it's always really easy to try to get the soldier perspective or the battle perspective, but that's sometimes not always what we need. And it's always great to bring in other perspectives, and especially when we're thinking of something like the American Civil War, which is largely, overwhelmingly fought by men, right? So we usually get the male perspective. This is a great way to bring in how a Tennessean, a Tennessee woman, is feeling about a particular battle. And the battle that we're talking about is the Battle of Shiloh. And what I really like about this, in case you're new to our website, I should also mention, in case you're new to our website, we have been diligently working through COVID and quarantine to get every single handwritten document on our education website transcribed. And we are nearly done with that process. We are just finally getting the last ones uploaded to our site. So if you haven't checked it out, feel free to go back and get some new ones. So in here, this is a great example of how she talks about the Battle of Shiloh, which was a surprise attack by the Confederates in West Tennessee. However, the Union got reinforcements during the night, and the Confederates lost that particular battle. It was extremely important, even though it was early in the war, which happened in 1862, because it essentially cut off anything west of the Mississippi to the Confederacy. And the biggest thing that happens during the battle is that Confederate General Johnston actually loses his life. And you'll see here through Rachel's diaries how impactful that is to morale for the South. Essentially, it's something that they're really never able to come back from. President Jefferson Davis even says that the Battle of Shiloh is really the turning point for their downfall. But what I really love about Rachel's is, again, right, those, when we read the standards, it's about who is involved and the significance of the battle, right? That's what we need to get our kids to understand. And Rachel does a great job of doing that. Rachel, takes information about how many people might have been killed. She also has here the specific dates. I know dates really aren't a thing we care about as much anymore, but in case we wanted them, they're there. She also talks a lot about General Johnston being killed, which I think is so important because we get to hear from Rachel how that's going to impact her. And she does support the Confederacy. So this also shows how support for the Confederacy has changed during this. She says he was killed while gallantly leading his men to victory. They were mourned so great a general, and that it is an irreparable loss to the army. And so, yeah, this is definitely a great source to get the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why from one particular battle. And it's a very easy source to read through. All right, y'all. So our next source here, jumping ahead to the 20th century, we are going to look at Abby Crawford Milton's Oral History on Anti-Suffragists. So one of the standards focuses on the tactics used by the suffragists and anti-suffragists. And this is a great example of hitting those exact standards because, as we all know, it's the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, and Tennessee was the last state to vote, becoming the 36th state and the very last state to give women the right to vote. So I'm going to try to see if you guys can hear it. I'm also going to put up the transcription on the page.
But the bribery that went on in that legislature is beyond belief. The men were promised to be made governors. Ever so many of them to be governors. And railroad commissioners, which seem to have been one of the highest things that they aspired for. And they were all bribed. And not only bribed, but after they were in session, and the suffrage, the votes that were for women's suffrage were swindled so badly. They get telegrams or telephone messages saying, "Come home, your wife is dying. Come home, your child is at the point of death." And they'd go, and we'd have to listen, sons of New Old Sounders and Lookout Mountain paid for a train to take one man home and bring him right back because we couldn't spare a vote. Now, one of them who was voting favorably. All those were tough times. And every evening in the Hermitage Hotel, there'd be so much drunkenness and fighting down in the lobby. They'd knock each other out. And the Antis wore the red roses on their coats.
All right. So that's a fantastic source. We've got a lot from this oral history. Abby Crawford Milton was the president of the Women's Suffrage, Tennessee Women's Suffrage Association in 1920. And we're really lucky to have that oral history. There's a lot of great suffrage materials here in Tennessee, but that one in particular, she was 101 at the time that it was recorded in the 80s. So we're really excited that we get to have that story. And again, just like all the things that the kids are supposed to pick up on to hit those standards, right? You know, what are the red roses? What does that mean? Who wore those? How do women advocate for themselves, both pro and against, when they don't have any voting rights? How are they participating in political maneuvers, in civics, when they can't even vote? And this is a great example of how women who have been participating in civic life since the beginning of this country are going to get the right to vote for themselves. All right, y'all. So our next source is also another favorite. I have so many favorites. This one, we're sticking around the same kind of time period. We are looking at World War I and the causes, which these standards are, the causes that make the US enter the war. And this one in particular regards the sinking of the Lusitania, which was a British ocean liner that was sunk by a German U-boat in 1915. And there were nearly 1,200 lives lost, so almost half the ship, and over 100 of those were American lives. And so this is going to cause a lot of turmoil within Americans, because some Americans want to stay neutral and not get into the war. Some, want to join immediately. And this is a great example of that, because this is coming from a woman named Frances Smith. And she is a woman from Bolivar, Tennessee, and she is writing to her tenant. She is a tenant, and she is just thanking John, who is her tenant, for his check. She says, "My dear John," which it's not a Dear John letter, but "My dear John, I wish to acknowledge with thanks the check for $45 rent to April 26, 1915, received a few days ago. Everything is going on as usual here, which means in a whirl. The war in Europe seems to depress everyone, but inspire much activity in the way of relief movements. We are all appalled by the sinking of the Lusitania and are wondering what it will cause our government to do. I am down on war, but I don't think my patience will hold out under much more provocation." That's what I really love about this document is, World War I and the sinking of Lusitania is a big worldly event, but it's still impacting Tennesseans here at home. And Frances is going to continue to write letters to John and that mention the war. She's really proud of the boys from Bolivar when we eventually do get involved in the war. And so this is great to get that local perspective. And again, we're hitting exactly what we're supposed to be hitting in those standards. We want to know why Americans how they felt about the sinking of Lusitania. This is a great example of how conflicted they were. All right, we've got 2 more sources to go, y'all. So our next source here is a beautiful source. Again, we're doing an image, so an image is worth 1,000 words again. And we're moving ahead to World War II, and we're looking at a propaganda piece. So this is a propaganda poster that's going to encourage victory gardens. Victory gardens are those gardens that families, both in World War I and World War II, they grew their own food to relieve some of the pressure from American farmers and transportation, because anything that we had, we were going to try to send it to our boys overseas. And this is a really great example of how, you can talk to the kids about how this is before computers. So this was created by an artist, and how art is being used at this time to push government propaganda. And it's not propaganda in a bad term, right? It's not a negative term. This is a very patriotic, let's all come together type of poster. You can see, most of the colors are red, white, and blue. What I also really love about this is it's a great way to connect to our students now, because most of them, for most of their lives, we've been in a war. And so talking to them about how our experience with that might have been different if we were in the 1940s, and how that has changed, and if any propaganda pieces have they seen anything similar. So it's a really great document. We have a ton of propaganda images, especially from World War II, but this one is easily one of my favorites that I wanted to share with y'all. And our very last document of the day is, of course, a civil rights image. And there's so many things I love about this image. Again, we're connecting to that artistic ability to create emotion, to prove our point. You can see here there is a young woman, and she is protesting outside the lunch counters. And so she says here with her sign, "We just can't shop on an empty stomach." And you can see the stomach kind of growling a little bit, which is, even today in 2020, we can pick up on that. My favorite thing about this source, like so many of the other ones we talked about today, is this is a great way to introduce civil rights to kids without any kind of context. You can put this up on the screen, you can show it virtually through your computer, and just ask the kids to kind of dig through it, because they're gonna find a lot of it on their own. It's really easy to tell that this woman, she's a Black woman. There's a white man back here in the corner. Those are the only two subjects in the photo. You can tell their emotions, right? She's pretty staring straight ahead, not really showing any emotion. And he's over here. We think he might be smiling, laughing. We're not sure. And then on top of that, we're not sure what they're seeing. So there's a lot of speculation here. But your kids are going to be able to pick up a lot of this, even without knowing what civil rights are. Also, a big connection to today. They've probably seen or maybe even participated in protests themselves, and might have seen protest signs either on the news or somewhere. So this is still a connection, right? And again, this is a young girl. And so it's them seeing themselves taking part in civic life. Even when you can't vote, there's a way to get your voice heard. And this is true even in the 1950s, which is when this picture is taken. And it's a great way to also connect to students, because when we think of civil rights, we probably think of places like Selma, Atlanta, Little Rock, but it also started here in Tennessee. And this one's actually from Chattanooga. So this one isn't even Nashville based. So it's a really great way to connect to students through those sources. Again, I know that was super quick, super fast, but you guys will definitely get all of these materials after the webinar. For right now, before I switch back to Kelly for some more resources, does anyone have any questions about the 10 documents that I showed you guys today? Thanks, Kelly, for putting them in there. All right, well, I'll keep a look on the chat. So if you guys do have any, I'll definitely respond to them. But for now, Kelly, I'm gonna go ahead and give a screen share back to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. Yeah, folks, still keep just dropping some of those questions in the chat. And Rosa, we're about to answer your question right now. Let me take a quick moment to share my screen. While I'm doing that, I also want to let you guys know that I have dropped the link to our website into the chat there. So if you guys want to explore it on your own, feel free to do so. But really quickly, I wanted to point you to where you can find a lot of these primary sources that Casey showed you. She shared with you some of our favorite documents from the Library and Archives collection, but there are thousands more primary sources that are available at the Library and Archives. So if you were to go to the URL that we dropped there in the chat, that is what is on my screen right now. As you can tell, at the Tennessee State Library and Archives, we are part of a greater division of the Tennessee Department of State. So there's a lot going on here at the top of our webpage, but I just want to draw your attention to the Library and Archives tab. And if you hover over that, and drag your cursor down to the education outreach section, that is what I'm going to show you guys right now. So at the education outreach page, we worked really hard to put the types of resources that educators need here in this one location. There's a lot of material that's available at the Library and Archives. There are a lot of audiences that we serve. So this page is dedicated to teachers in the K-12 community and your students. So you can see our navigation there on the left-hand side of the page. Our at-home learning, I may not have time to show you guys that today, but take a look at that. It is a page that we put up really quickly in the spring that includes a lot of like simple, easy activities that kids could do at home with their parents. Couple of lesson plans on how to document pandemics and how to explore creating your own materials, that document the story of what we're all experiencing here in the world these days. So there's a lot of great resources there for you to explore. But I want to go directly to our primary sources tab. Okay, so I'm going to click there. And to get to answering Rose's question, the way you find more primary sources at our website is to just visit this page. And you can see here the eras of American history as they are typically defined in the Tennessee Social Studies standards. You'll see, eras that you recognize: growth of the Republic, Civil War and Reconstruction, all the way on to modern United States. Really quickly, I'm going to click on our growth of the Republic era just to show you a little bit about what these pages start to look like, okay? Now, as you scroll on down the page, you'll see some keywords that are there on the page. These keywords come directly from the Tennessee Social Studies curriculum standards, okay? So say you're interested in teaching more about Sequoia and the Cherokee, you're just going to click right there on that keyword, and it will take you to 12 primary sources from our collection at the Library and Archives on both Sequoia and the Cherokee here in Tennessee. You'll see there's a couple of illustrations of folks that you guys might recognize. And as you keep scrolling, you'll start to see some maps and some handwritten documents. Really quickly, I'm going to click here on the Constitution of the Cherokee Nation, 1827. And show you guys one of the things that Casey was mentioning, that we have spent a lot of time transcribing documents over the course of the pandemic. Since we couldn't host teacher workshops or have kids in for field trips, we spent a lot of time improving our website. All you would have to do to use this document in your classroom is just click on the download button, and it will download as a PDF. But if you guys are interested in the transcription, all you need to do is just keep scrolling down the page through all of that metadata that provides you information about the Cherokee Constitution until you come to this link that says transcription link. And if you were to click on that link, you're going to get this, this document will actually open up on your screen. So that'll make it available and easy for you guys to use in the classroom. All right, so let me back out of our Tennessee Virtual Archive is where we're sharing a lot of this material. You can go through all of the eras and you'll find keywords that come directly from the Social Studies curriculum standards. You will also find here at the bottom the standard numbers. These are the standard numbers that do come from the 2014 Social Studies Content Standard. We have not had a chance yet to re-tag the thousands of primary sources that we tagged to the 2014 standards. We've not been able to re-tag those to the newer standards, but hopefully one day we'll get to that. We are a pretty small education staff. We have 2.5 positions. So, we hope that we'll get to that one day and be able to tag those. But for now, you could still explore primary sources by these 2014 standards. And of course, the keywords have been updated. There were some changes, of course, with the new version of the standards. So we absolutely went through that content and re-tagged things and included some new keywords that didn't show up in the previous standards. Now, one of the newest resources we've been working on for this year, you're going to find under classroom resources. And I'm going to click there on that screen and show you guys our digital breakouts. Does most everyone probably know what a digital breakout is? I'm figuring you guys use them in your classroom. We know that they're really popular. They're kind of based on that escape room concept. It's just put in an online version. So I'm going to click here on our full page of digital breakouts. We started working on this back in the summer. So we only have about 10 right now, but we've got several more that hopefully will be coming in the coming weeks and months. We created essentially two versions of our digital breakouts. You've got an elementary version there, and essentially that's just a one visual screen. And then when you click on that, there's going to be symbols or pictures of artifacts or things that the kids can explore and answer questions. This is all based in a Google Form activity. So, if you guys are Google Classrooms, these should fit really well into your Google Classroom assignments. We also have a series that are created for middle and high school. So, focusing on the standards that appear for elementary kids, that Tennessee Symbols one, of course, is really great for K2, but then we have the middle and high school topics that fit the needs of the middle and high school social studies standards. So those are our brand new resources that we have. And, you know, we hope that we'll have several more coming. That is our plan, you know, to share with you guys, and hopefully use those in the classrooms. The last thing I will mention is just our DocsBox program. And our DocsBox program is on hold just a little bit right now, but we do still have our women's suffrage DocsBox that is available if you guys are interested in that. You know, certainly spend some time on this page and explore that. Our docs boxes are just like traveling trunks that a lot of you are familiar with. We'll ship those out to the classroom. Right now, because of COVID-19, we just have the women's suffrage ones that are still available, and they do go through a cleaning process when they come back, you know, into the library and archives before we ship them out to new teachers. But definitely take a look at this page and explore that. And, you know, I lied a little bit because there is one more thing I want to mention, and that is going to be our student history of Tennessee. And I don't know if you guys have been able to explore this site. This is a site that we put up a couple of years ago. And essentially, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the Tennessee Blue Book. Everybody's probably heard of that. There is a history section that's in that Tennessee Blue Book. And so what we did probably about 2.5 years ago, we had a teacher, a middle school teacher, take that content and kind of rewrite it for a middle school audience, sort of targeting that 5th grade Tennessee history course that was coming. So we had her, you know, kind of work on that content. And so essentially what that produced for us are just these series of chapters that you guys could explore. And we've spent a lot of time on Jackson today, so I'm gonna jump to early 20th century and explore that page just a little bit. When you land on this page, you guys will see some terms and definitions, you know, content, just some, you know, good Tennessee history content that's geared towards this middle school audience. And then primary sources that you can explore. I also want to draw your attention to the assessment materials that have been created. These were created by teachers for us, and you know, say you're interested in assigning your students a quiz. This here is a PDF version of this quiz based on the content for that chapter. We have answer keys. We are happy to send them to you guys. We don't provide them on the website because that would make it far too easy for the students. So, you know, we do ask that teachers just email us if you're interested in doing that. And I will ask that if you are interested in those, please just give us your name and where you teach. You guys, well, you're probably not surprised by how many students try to email me to get the answer keys themselves. So we have to be vigilant and make sure that we don't do that. So any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Well, actually, I think we've got a couple of slides that we probably want to show you guys about our upcoming webinars. All right. I hope you guys can see that. So we have one more webinar from the Tennessee State Library and Archives that is coming up on December 10th. Rocking Around the Family Tree, Genealogical Resources from the Tennessee State Library and Archives. We are going to use that session mostly to focus on some material that will help you guys include genealogical resources in your classroom if you guys are interested in that. But it's also just a treat for December. So if teachers are interested in doing some of their own genealogy research over the holidays while you're spending time with family, you will certainly be able to learn a bit about what is available to you for free from the Library and Archives at that webinar. And feel free to just sign up on that. When we send out an email post workshop, I will include, you know, information about how to register for that. I know we also have our upcoming Discover Tennessee webinar. Kira, do you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, actually, if you're finished, I've got a couple slides to wrap us up.
Yeah, I have stopped sharing, so I'll hand things off to Kira. Guys, thank you all so much for indulging us in our session today. Hopefully we're not going to run you too much over. If you guys have any questions, Casey and I will both hang around and answer any questions that you all have in the chat thanks for coming to the webinar, and let us know if there's anything that we can do for you out in your classrooms. We know you guys are having a tough year. And I'm going to hand things off to Kira to kind of wind things down.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. We have, of course, several more sessions left in this series. Our next session will be December the 8th. That is African American History in Your Classroom, a panel discussion. And that is going to be presented by the Tennessee State Museum. And then in January, on January 12th, the session will be a virtual visit to the Museum of East Tennessee History. And that's presented by the East Tennessee Historical Society. The series will run through March, so we'll have 2 more after those 2. And of course, you can register for those using the form that's available there. And of course, we can drop that link in the chat box if you need that. And of course, we want to get your feedback. So there is a survey for today's session, and Kelly's going to drop the link for that in the chat box as well. So if you would take a few minutes to complete that survey for us, we really would appreciate your feedback. And of course, also, all of our organizations would love to know kind of what you guys are looking for when you're thinking about professional development and resource needs for the spring, as we are definitely still thinking about what we can do to serve you guys during that period of time. And again, thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed the session, and know that you can find any of the recordings from previous sessions on the Teaching with Primary Sources MTSU YouTube page. And so we'll make that available as well. Thank you guys, and have a great afternoon.